Welcome to Leadership and Life Chat with your hosts, me, Becky Ames.
And me, Mark Curtis. In each episode, we'll be illustrating how success in leadership is inextricably linked with success in life.
Whether it's leadership in business, society, family or friends, we're all leaders.
Using our experiences and a range of expert guests, we'll share secrets to boosting your health, wealth and self.
So let's get on with the show.
Today's episode is no ordinary episode because today's episode is the last episode. And for those that don't know, my name is James Lay. I was the presenter for the first 100-odd episodes of Leadership and Life Chat. I carried the series went through the best years with the highest audience numbers. And I'm back for the last ever show. I've been invited on by Becky and Mark trying to prop up the listener numbers. So thank you for getting me back on, guys. That's what you asked me to say.
We can soon edit you out.
No, it's a real pleasure to be back. It's a real pleasure to be back. It's been a long time. I'm very rusty. I've dug out my microphone from a dusty cupboard literally a couple of minutes ago. And I need to be guided by you two, really. Last ever episode. What number is it? 100 and what?
I don't know, Mark. What number is it?
Don't know. It must be about 140 now, I think, isn't it?
Probably.
Right. This is what happens when I leave. Like, we were on it, honestly. I left on like episode 97. We were in the pretty much the top 10 for podcasts at that point, Mark.
Here we go.
Top 10 of podcasts in Larkingowan, I think. Yeah.
Yeah. They're only
anyway. James, it's a pleasure to have you here.
Well, as I say, it's nice to be here. It's a big moment in time, isn't it, in podcasting history? Last ever episode. This is it, Mark. You've carried your bat, as they say in cricket, through the entire innings from start to finish, not out. How's it feel?
Yeah, good. Yeah, been a really enjoyable experience. Yeah, I feel like I'm being interviewed after a football match. Yeah, it's been. What can I say? It was a great innings, wasn't it? Cricket match, yeah. No, I mean, it's been a tremendous experience being on a podcast as a host. Never done it before until we started the Impromptu Business Chat. And here we are, the last episode in the series. And the reason it's the last one is because I'm not just hanging up my headset from podcasting, I'm actually hanging up my calculator and pen from accountancy and heading off into the early retirement sunset.
Very early,
Mark's
I'd like
a lot older than he looks, isn't he, Becky?
No, he's younger than me.
Well, I didn't like to say anything. Yeah.
Rude.
So you're retiring, Mark?
Yep, gonna head off and live the good life, hopefully.
Literally the good life as well, isn't it? Because you're into your allotments and all the dull stuff like that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, or otherwise known as essential human skills. Could be another way to look at it.
So come on, in case the listeners aren't aware, how old are you? Or listener, probably as it is these days.
Yeah, 49.
49, yeah. So
a very good age.
It is an early retirement. Are you going to do anything after, apart from maybe starting up your own podcast? Are you going to do anything in your retirement?
Well, obviously, just not probably not business related. It's about simplifying our lives. We're going to kind of, really go back to learning core skills. So I listened to a podcast ages ago and the guy said, do you know what? Humans need 5 things. They need food, water, shelter, clothing, and tribe. It's all they need. And nowadays, virtually everyone can buy all of those with cash, but it doesn't feed the soul. And I think, just want to get back to providing more of those things from skills I can learn rather than just changing money for those experiences. So it's kind of like I guess it's de-teching our lives and going back to a more simple way of living.
Are you retiring soon, Becky?
No. Do you think I should?
Well, you're a similar age, you see, so I thought maybe it was coming.
No,
I'm quite a lot younger than both of you.
But 3 months older than Mr. Curtis, so I will be continuing, but not on the podcast because this is the last ever Leadership Life Chat podcast. So we're going to take this opportunity to really sort of dive into our learnings, I guess, particularly Mark's, obviously, but the key things that we've picked up along the way and have helped us grow. Really,
Sounds
the
good.
direction we wanted to take it, wasn't it?
Yeah.
We've spent a lot of time, haven't we, interviewing some amazing guests, and we thought, well, between us, we've got thick end of 100 years of experience in business now. There must be things we've learned lessons we've learned in leadership as well, and our lives. So, why not share some of that with the listeners as well?
Yeah, I mean, I have been listening in to the episodes that since my retirement. You've had some great guests on, not as great as the guests, obviously, that in the first 97, I think it was, episodes. But no, there'd be some fantastic, good value in there. I think we need to sort of stick that into AI. Don't think that really existed when we started the show back in, when was it, Mark? It was
2020.
April 2020. Different world
Yeah,
then,
just
wasn't
after
it? I'm in the
lockdown
office
had hit.
today.
Yeah.
I'm in the office today. Wasn't doing that in April 2020. Where are you, Becky? You're in the
No,
office as
I'm
well?
in the office.
Mark's at home. Some things don't
Mark's
change,
still
do
at
they?
home.
Yeah, I'm at home.
So Mark, come on then. Focusing on you, it's all about you, really. We will talk about the show, and we'll combine those 100 years. I mean, again, probably 80 years or so taken up by Becky and Mark. But in all seriousness, difficult to say favourite episode because I'm sure there's loads of favourites. But which ones have you got the most out of?
I mean, it is like we always say at the end of a guest episode, when we come up with our 3 key takeaways for us, we all say, "Oh my god, that was so difficult." It's so great. We can't possibly pick 3, and I think it's a bit like that with the guests. One of the ones which really stood out for me was a guest we had on actually not that long ago, Dawn Bloomer. And Dawn very much works with business owners, not on selling their business, but what they're going to do after they've sold their business, what's next for them. And I think probably that was one of the things which really made me think long and hard, just from a personal perspective as well. It's very easy to help business owners develop their business, grow their business, reach whatever it is they want to achieve in terms of their business goals. But very often we don't actually say to them, so what's next? Not just in a business sense, but what's next for you as an individual, and to help with that transition. And I think that's what Dawn experienced it herself in the sale of her business. She was a veterinarian specializing in racehorses, and she sold her practice and then thought, wow, what next? And just those questions about why are you selling? It's like everything else in life, isn't it? Why are you doing it? Are you doing it for the right reasons? Same as when people decide to perhaps leave a business and move to a new job. Are they leaving for the right reasons? Are they trying to get away from something which could in fact be themselves? And then it's going to follow them everywhere. It's the same with business owners, isn't it? Why are you selling your business? What's next? Are you trying to get away from something, or are you actually moving towards something?
That's one of the. I mean, it's obviously a line of work that I focus on is helping people sell their businesses, and it's interesting. I absolutely have that conversation with clients at the very outset, because firstly, it's a long process to go through a sale. You've got to be committed to it in the first place. But actually, sometimes you can leap to the assumption that you want to sell your business or you want to retire. But you're right. It's actually, there might be something solvable in there once you've established, is it a push factor or a pull factor, and actually sometimes these things can be solved, and you're better off staying in. But you've presumably gone through that process, Mark, and you are comfortable with your decision, are you? Because you've only got about 20 business days until
It's actually, I think it's about 14 working days
roughly
till
3
till I
hours,
hang
2 minutes.
approximately. But yeah, no, definitely. I mean, this was, I guess this is all about you can have long-term goals or long-term plans, and then you have to work a series of goals to get towards them. And this was a long-term plan. Glenda and I had talked about this since probably about 2012. So talk about a long-term plan, and I just finished reading, and this isn't a book I'm going to mention later, but it is, it was at the time, it was Robert Kiyosaki, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, and he talked very much around sort of P&L and balance sheet in his terms rather than accountancy terms,
assets and liabilities.
And I can still remember it. Yeah, I can remember it as clear as a bell, which was, most people start to earn more money and their P&L doesn't look any better because they've got a higher turnover, if you like, but they increase their expenditure. So their P&L gets no better, which means their balance sheet gets no better. In fact, they just take on more debt because they've got a higher income, and you just end up in this trap where you become a slave almost to the income, and you need more and more, and it just becomes a hamster wheel. And I had a very long conversation. Glenda and I sat down, and we literally just moved into the house we live in now. And we were talking about almost what's next, what would be our next move on the housing ladder. And we kind of talked about it and said, no, this is it. This is where we're staying now. And we've kind of had this, what was it now, 14 years ago, this long-term plan about what we wanted to achieve with our lives. So we didn't gear our lives up any further than we got to in 2012. So that was massive because we had clarity about what we both wanted, and we both wanted to at some point buy back time to do other things other than business, and that was the long-term plan we had, and then we just had to put a series of goals into place to deliver upon those longer-term objectives.
So Becky, would you, if you, I mean, I'm sure you can if you choose to, but would you choose to retire now? How
No.
does that sit with you?
No, and I think I've spoken about this on the podcast, but I've certainly spoken about this with my coach. I have, in inverted commas, a fear of retirement, and it's something I'm going to have to deal with because too much of my purpose is tied up in my work.
Yeah.
For me, how I, the first thing we ask people is that we've definitely spoken about this on the podcast, Mark, about, we identify people by what they do. Oh, so what do you do? And that's not right, is it? I don't think. But I'm very aware that there's, I identify with what I do in my role in the business, and I'm very much like, what would my purpose be? So at some point over the next several years, hopefully I've got time to work that out.
Yeah, it's all about getting a bit of a run up to it, isn't it? If you won the lottery overnight and suddenly was, put in the position, almost like the onus is then on you to retire. Why would you work? But that's quite dangerous, isn't it? Because then you think, well, I had half term off a couple of weeks ago. I had a week off, and for once, I didn't really do anything. I stayed at home and spent time with the kids, and it was great. And I got bits and pieces done, bit of life admin, and had some, I got busy, I suppose, in the course of the week. But by the end of the week, I had a nice time, really nice time with the kids and stuff. But by the end of it, it worked really well. I was keen to get back into work on the Monday, and I did think, oh crikey, I'm not sure I could do this yet, probably. So I sort of, on the one hand, I'm very envious of Mark because he's engineered. This hasn't happened by chance. He has engineered this, created this opportunity for himself. And on the other hand, it would probably scare me a bit at the moment because I haven't had that run up. I haven't got my mind around what I would do with my time, how I'd get that sense of purpose, how I'd pay the bills. There's lots to think about in the lead in. I know on one of our episodes we had Paul McVeigh on there, and as a footballer, you are forced to retire in your 30s, a little bit earlier than Mark, but not much. That's a challenge for footballers as well, isn't it? And he's obviously reinvented himself as a psychologist and all the good work he's doing. So yeah, no, well, good luck to you, Mark. I have to say,
thank you. Yeah.
I'm pleased that you're saying that you've, I kind of knew this already, but I'm reassured that you've not. This wasn't a snap decision 3 months ago, was it? This has been part of your life plan.
No.
Wasn't something that Becky said on a podcast.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no, it's nothing to do with Becky.
I can't take this anymore.
I think the interesting thing is, isn't it? It's like, we say leadership in life. We're leaders in business and our life, and it's all, we've always been trying to draw lessons out from the guest episodes we've had about how can we apply this. Where is it applicable to apply? And I guess this is, what we've been talking around here is a great example of how mission, vision, values, long-term objectives, short-term goals to move towards that objectives. This stuff is all relevant to business and to personal life because it's exactly the same, isn't it? You've either got some kind of structure, however loose it is around it. So, the example we gave there, 12 years ago, Glenda and I kind of set our mission. We had shared values around what we wanted to achieve and why and how we were going to do it. And then we started to put a series of objectives and goals in place to move towards that long-term planning. So, it's no different to business, is it? It's exactly the same. In fact, if you get all of those things aligned, that's kind of when the magic happens in your business as well. And I think one of the things which I think probably see with businesses is it is very much kind of short term, just doing things, and they might be a 1 year plan with some goals around it, but having that 5 to 10 year plan of where you think the business is going, it doesn't mean it's got to be massively detailed. And Becky and I have talked about this in the past as well, and I think the term I'd probably use is roadmap around it. It's having that roadmap of where you see it going. It doesn't mean it's not going to be flexible and change, because life happens and the world happens and stuff happens, but at least having some kind of roadmap allows you to see if you're on the right kind of trajectory towards it. But also you can adapt your short-term goals, maybe your 3 to 6 to 12 month goals, to kind of tweak it as you go, if that's still the applicable roadmap you're following. And that's the bit I probably see least of with a lot of businesses I've worked with over the years, which is they don't really have a roadmap. It is a little bit more knee-jerk, hand-to-mouth sort of 12-month planning cycles. And for me, I think it is, you both would probably say, Curtis, you are very disorganized. And in a lot of respects, I am very disorganized because I'm happy to just kind of see what happens with stuff. But I do have quite a clear vision of the future, whether it be when I was running business in private or in my own personal life. I have a very clear, it's not written down on 10 sheets of paper, but there is a very clear kind of heading and a sense of direction. And that's the bit that I think I would like to see more businesses take control of, which is have this roadmap, know where they think they might want to be in 5 to 10 years' time, and then work towards it.
Yeah, we've talked about this quite a lot, haven't we? And I think the episode we did with Ben Coomber springs to mind in terms of you have to stop and reflect, don't you? Whether you are where you want to be, whether it's still where you what you want to be doing. And when I talk about my fear of retirement, and I do put that in inverted commas because I appreciate that's not a real fear, that doesn't mean that I do love what I do, and I constantly reflect on that and make myself consciously think about, actually, is this going the way that I still want it to go, etc. So that's partly what kind of steers me when I'm like, so what could it look like in 20 years' time if I'm not doing this? But I think it's so important, and we absolutely discussed this at length with Ben, didn't we, about you have to stop, just keep thinking, is this where I want to be? Is this where I want to go? Rather than just powering through regardless. So I completely agree. You need the roadmap. Yeah. You also need to know that there are alternative routes, and sometimes be compelled to go down them. You might be forced to go down them sometimes, but that you have options, and that you should always be reviewing it and making sure it's still where you want and should be.
And there's no right and wrong with it either. That's the thing, and no one should apologize for what it is. I mean, look at Warren Buffett. He's 94 and he's still effectively heading the business and talking to the shareholders once a year about what he sees happening. It's what he loves. It's his purpose. It's his calling, isn't it? And no one should feel ashamed that business is what their calling is. I love what I've done. I'm going to talk almost past tense about it now, even though I'm kind of 14 days away. But I've absolutely loved it. I cannot believe some of the things I've got to do that I never dreamt I would have done. Talk about comfort zone. My comfort zone is about 1 million times bigger than it was as an 18-year-old heading into the office life for the first time. And I think, wow, I just can't believe it. I just cannot believe some of the experiences I've had, TV, radio, podcasts. It's like, how on earth did that happen? I went in with armed with a calculator on day one, adding up a VAT cash book or something. It's like, how far can you come on your journey within a career? But it doesn't mean that there's not other stuff that I actually feel equally, if not more passionate about, which I want to deliver now. So it's just about being honest with yourselves, isn't it? And kind of taking control of your life rather than letting life happen to you.
Yeah.
And I think that's where it comes down to leadership. Is it be the leader of your own life? Don't just let life happen to you. And I think probably 80% of the world just drifts through life. Just it happens to them. Just that's just a crying shame for me, because who knows? We may be the only inhabited planet in the whole known and unknown universe. We might live once. We might have multiple lives, depending on your views on things. But wow, this is just, isn't it amazing that we're here, we're alive today, and we actually, we have choices in what we do. We don't want to. We could go on a whole sidetrack about determination and free will, but that's not for today's podcast. I believe in free will. I think we can make this stuff happen, and don't let it happen to you. Make it happen. That would be, and there's times in my life where I perhaps have gone with the flow a little bit, but most of the time I've acted out of free will and tried to experience life as well. However scary it might be, it's still an experience.
It's interesting because you talk about choices, Mark, and recognizing that we've got choices. Actually, that can be like, why don't people do that? And it can be a bit scary to do that, because then that leads to accountability in your decision making. It can be more comfortable. Again, you talked about your comfort zone. It can be more comfortable to almost feel a victim to life, and that you've got to do this and you've got to do that. Actually, you've recognised that along the way, you've deviated from the norm quite a lot through your career, but towards the end now, and that's just recognition that you've challenged what others might assume. You will work to your 60, you work to your 65. We had Chris Mason on I think it was our first interview guest at episode 20. Spoke with Chris. You still speak with him, I know. I spoke with Chris last week. He's still intending to work into his 80s. And he's full on.
Yeah.
He is absolutely, he's putting a shift in every single day. And he's got real purpose through what he's doing. The contrast it's quite interesting to see.
But he's doing it consciously, isn't he, James? He's not just letting
Absolutely.
it happen to him.
So, he's not trapped to do it. He knows he could have retired 20, 30 years ago from a financial perspective, but not. He knows he's delivering value to other people, and that's in terms of his values. Value to others. After his book is something that he holds dear. So it's living to your values, isn't it?
Definitely, yeah, and that's the thing. It's being able to look in the mirror and be, well, like we said, it's living your life consciously rather than just letting life happen to you, isn't it? It's kind of looking in the mirror, saying, what do I want? How do I achieve it? What matters to me? What's really important? And how do I get there? And I mean, while we're on this, a slight diversion, but I think we talked about comfort zones there, and I've had some tremendous experiences, and it all sounds great and fluffy looking back at it, doesn't it? Through the rose tinted. I've spent half of my working life, I suppose the word would be scared, and I've done things which have pushed me out of my comfort zone, and it's a scary place to be. And because other people, when you're partners especially, and you've got plenty of miles on the clock, people look at you and go, oh, "It's all right for you, though. Look, you're a partner. It's fine." I haven't always been a partner, and I've spent half my life doing things which have made me feel uncomfortable. So I don't think that anyone should ever think, oh, well, actually, it scares me so much, therefore I can never do stuff like that. And just a quick anecdotal story. Years ago now, I was asked to do a business breakfast, which was, as it says, a breakfast, a business session, which is held over a breakfast. And we would present to a group of about 100 people on a topic. I'd never done it before. I had a massive, massive fear of public speaking, which I think stemmed back to when I was at school. And I had to withdraw from a school play because I just could not sleep. And it stayed with me since I was about 9 years old. And I'd done some presentations, nothing too major through my career. And Ian Fitch, one of our fellow partners, he phoned me up and said, "Oh, Mark, hi, Ian here. Chris Greaves, who was the partner who used to present the breakfast with him, Chris is going on holiday. He's going to be in America. Will you do the business breakfast with me?" And I honestly, like, I think my heart literally stopped for a few seconds. And I said to Ian, I'm going to I just need to check my diary. I'll give you a call back. So I put the phone down, like literally sweaty armpits, beads
Putting
of
something in
sweat
your diary
forming on my
straight away.
brow.
Oh, no.
It was like, oh no, this is like the worst thing ever. I thought, oh, what do I do? What am I going to do? What am I going to do? I know, I'll phone Glenda, my wife. So I'm sitting in my office. I phoned Glenda up and I said, "Oh, Glenda, you're not going to believe this. It's like my worst nightmares come true. Fitch has just asked me to do a business breakfast with him. What am I gonna do?" And these are Glenda's words. So they're not overly PC, but they're coming from Glenda. She said, "Mark, you just need to man up and do it."
Ooh.
And I thought she's right. She's absolutely spot on. I need to do this. So I literally put the phone back. I'm like, oh, hi, Ian. Yeah, check my diary. Yeah, it's absolutely fine, mate. Yeah, I can do that. And the first one was so scary. Honestly, I stood up and I couldn't feel my legs. It's like we had a breakfast beforehand before the actual thing starts, and I'm trying to eat this breakfast, and it's like way worse than a best man speech for those people who've done it. It felt way worse. And I stood up. I thought, yeah, I'm going to regurgitate my sausage and eggs here in a minute, I think. And literally, I could not feel my legs. My mouth was moving, words were coming out, but it was like it wasn't really happening. And then I relaxed into it a bit, and then thereafter, I just really started to enjoy public speaking after that. But and I'm sure you've both got stories of things you've done that have been so scary, and I think that so the thing I think I'd probably say to people listening to this is if you think you're going to be scared of stuff which is going to hold you back, yeah, you are going to be scared. But it's almost like you get 20% of the people who will do stuff when they're scared. And that's almost that's almost like the magic ingredient, doing stuff when you're scared to do it, but just do it anyway.
It's that feel the fear and do it anyway, isn't it? And you said earlier, Mark, you've had loads of opportunities, things you thought you'd never do, but it's because you grabbed hold of those opportunities that you did them. No one, I know there's lots of things that we probably do because we know it's good to progress our career, but equally, no one held your arm behind your back and said, you will do this. You had choice at every stage, and you chose to challenge yourself, develop, do this stuff. And I think we do it all the time, don't we? We agree to things, and at the time you're sort of like, oh, that's in 3 months, I'll worry about it when it happens, kind of thing.
Yeah.
And
But
I'll do my prep, and it comes around and you're like, well,
yeah.
this is all part of the journey, isn't it?
And I don't know about you two, and it has led to plenty of sleepless nights. So I've been a
Yeah.
partner nearly 18 years now. It's led to a lot of sleepless nights, and it's led to a lot of grumpy Curtis around the household. Glenda's like, "What's the matter? Nothing. Come on, just tell me." And then about 2 days later, I say, "Okay, I'm really worried about that presentation I'm doing in a week's time, or whatever." So it does impact on your life, and I think it's like, but that doesn't make it bad, because I look back now, and I feel richer for those experiences.
And we've spoken about the fact that you do have to make sacrifices sometimes. You have to make choices, and family kind of sign up for this as well along the way, don't they? and
Yeah.
sometimes bear the brunt of it. It doesn't make it right, but
No.
if you understand where you're going and why you're doing this stuff, you can reconcile it a bit better, I think. But there was a comment you made earlier about the people go, oh, it's all right, you're a partner. This stuff doesn't go away just because you're a partner either, does it? I don't want any of
No.
our people listening to this going, oh, so if I get to partner, it'll all be fine.
No.
Oh, no.
It's just new boundary. You're just forging new boundaries all the while,
Yeah.
aren't you? And it's not just business, is it? Like I'm not the most like I'm not the bravest person out there. I'm not Mr. Gung Ho, base jumping, kind of like living on the edge
You'd have to get
Curtis
on a
type bloke.
plane to go somewhere to
I'd
base
have to go
jump.
on a plane, exactly. And that's not me. How you are is how you are, isn't it? Whether it's in business or in personal life. And like in 2012, 3 of my mates said, right, we're going to go to the Alps cycling. Should we all go? The 4 of us, we used to cycle together. And I'm like, oh, I love the idea of going cycling in the Alps, but the thought of descending, like, really scares me badly. I'm thinking I'm going to die. I'm going to die crashing my racer. So I decided I would do it. So the 4 of us drove down there for, I don't know, 3 or 4 days, whatever it was. And honestly, I was running so many negative scenarios. So this comes back to, I guess, then mindset and controlling like the voice inside your head, or at least not listening all the while to the voice inside your head. I'd be thinking, God, I'm going to be descending at like 40, 50 miles an hour. Not because I'm a daredevil, but because you've got no choice, because it's so steep, unless you're going to superheat your rims and burn your brakes out on your racer, you've got to let it flow a little bit. What about if my front forks collapse? What about if I get a blowout of a tire? I had all this thought, I'm wearing like Lycra. Okay, not a pleasant thought, I know. Even less pleasant if I've like scraped it off sliding down the road, and it's like I had all those same like negative chatters going on that I'd have had about doing a business breakfast presentation or going on the radio or the TV. Exactly the same voices appeared in my head about, what about if your front forks go? What about if your brakes fail? What about if your tire blows out? And this is not helpful when you're sitting at the top of Alpe d'Huez about to do the descent, But I gradually relaxed into it. I went for the next year as well, and I actually started to enjoy it. I enjoyed the feeling of like being in control of the bike and as much as you ever can be in those situations. And I overcame the fear and did something else. So I think some of this is understanding how you're wired as a human,
Mm.
what your patterns tend to be. My patterns are very repetitive around having to do things that I don't feel comfortable doing. I mean, my new one is beekeeping. The first time I had to go to the apiary with my bee suit on, open up the hive, and you've got like thousands and thousands of bees like swarming around you, hitting your veil. I had exactly those same fear. What about if I get stung? What about if I'm allergic to them? What about if I get anaphylactic shock? What about if I die of anaphylactic shock? I've got exactly the same thought processes going on that I've always had for everything else, but you just get a little bit better at kind of ignoring them and saying, yeah, it's just a thought. It's easier to let, when it happens when you're younger, it's harder because you haven't had the life experiences to know that that's your pattern and be used to maybe how your head works.
You can also enhance those. I think that it can be a positive. The concerns you have, if you channel it in the right way, can be your strength, can be your friend, because you're doing your presentation. Okay, well, what are the controllables? Controllables are being well prepared, visualizing it beforehand, planning the morning, making sure that you arrive on time, making sure the equipment's working, getting to know a few people in the audience before you speak, easing yourself in. Like you can create a plan for that, and you can worry about it. The worst thing is you worry about it, you do nothing about it. You're just making matters, far worse. But if actually it sort of, you can embrace it, leave the worrying until the event itself, because the fear is not healthy, doesn't do you any good, and you're not actually, in talk about sort of Eckhart Tolle and sort of being in the now. You're not in that moment until you get to that moment. In the meantime, just channel that concern into actionable, positive steps, which will mean that actually when it comes round, you'll be in a much better position. And I mean, public speaking, we had Andrew Brammer on again talking around, how to do presentations, and it comes down to putting the hard work in. It's like doing the work. Stop worrying and do the work. And I think that comes down to a lot of the concerns that you've got. Actually, you might not be ready today, a bit like, your bees, and having all the equipment and having the knowledge. So it is quite concerning, but you channel it in the right way. And, you'll be selling honey on the road outside or something, will you, Mark, by the summer? Have you got any bees now?
No, I'll get them in June when the new queens hatch and the nucleus. Well, I won't bore you with the details, but I should be getting them in June this year. So probably next year will be the first proper honey crop. This year will be more for the bees, food for themselves. But
fantastic. Well, similarly to prepping, when you've got those fears, I think as well, it was really interesting what you were saying, Becky, in terms of you become a partner, and these things don't get any easier. They don't particularly. I think also, actually, in many respects, the benchmark is raised because people their expectations of you increase. It does actually apply a little bit more pressure. So, if anything, it gets harder as you progress your career. But I think one approach that really helps with this sort of thing is having an inquisitive mind and not assuming you don't know everything, and that you can ask the stupid question. And I think, sometimes, again, as you get more senior, you feel like you can't ask the stupid questions because you should know the answers to these things. And I think having that, bravery, courage, just to let's take that back again. I didn't understand that. Just explain to me again. Or I don't know the answer to that. I'll come back to you. But asking lots of questions as well, and that's one thing that you've never been short of, is it, Mark? You're pretty comfortable asking questions.
Yeah, as you were saying that, I'm sure you were both in the partnership at the time, but when John Woolston, who was our previous managing partner, occasionally John would come out with a really big word in a partners meeting, and I'd be thinking, I don't know what that word means.
2 syllables.
So I'd literally, like, we'd sit in the partners meeting and I'd put my hand up and I could see John just like, oh, here we go. Sorry, John, I don't know what that word means. Can you just explain it? And I guess it's just letting go of your ego, isn't it? At that point, it's like, I don't care. If you don't know what the word is, you don't know what it is. If you do, you do.
It doesn't make you thick, does it? It just means you haven't come across that word before?
The interesting thing then is it kind of makes you more conscious of what you say yourself, because if you're going to use big, clever words, you need to know what they mean. Because if anyone's like brave enough to go, sorry, I don't know what that means, can you tell me? and they don't know. They look like a proper numpty. So, luckily John could always tell me what the word meant. But it was a big lesson for me, which is if you're going to try and use fancy Dan language, at least, don't try and be something you're not. Just if you don't know something, just ask. Inquisitive mind is always there, and I know I've shared the story with both of you, and and we've all said on the podcast, just be that annoying 5-year-old. That's kind of, it's just that inquisitive. How does this work? What happens if I press this button? It's just that kind of inquiring mind, isn't it? And this would have been, I don't know, like 1980 or something. I was 5 or 6 years old, and my mum and dad had an extension built on their bungalow, and the guy who built it was a friend of my dad's, and I went to school with some of his kids. This guy Terry had about 6 kids, I think. When my dad got home from work one day, because as soon as I got in from school, I'd be there like chatting to Terry, wanting to know what he was doing, like, finding out, why'd you put that much cement in with that much sand? It'd just be constant. And luckily he'd never dropped a brick from a great height or anything. But Dad got home one day and he said to my dad, he's like, David, he said, I've got 6 kids and your son asked me more questions than my 6 put together. And I think that's just been me. I was the same at school as well. And, on a previous podcast, we've talked about my history lesson experience with Mr. Farman and how I could get a B, how I could move from a B to an A. And I've always been the same through my career as well. It's just me as a human being. I want to know how stuff works. And I think that set me in really good stead because I like to kick the tires. I like to find out a little bit about how things work. I'm not worried about becoming an absolute expert in an area. I want to have a wider breadth of knowledge across a lot of topics because then you can start to join things together. And I think in what we do for a living, unless you happen to be a very, very specialist tax advisor, something of the ilk, then I think having a much broader range of topics and subjects, whether they're business or not, because everything comes back to business and life anyway, I think it makes you a more rounded individual to talk and work with your clients and help your clients.
Yeah. And I think in our roles, particularly, Mark, that is important. And also knowing when to say, I don't know, but I'll find out, which comes back to James's point about it's okay to say that you don't know or you don't understand what a word is. And saying that in front of your team is so powerful, isn't it? Because then it's almost like saying, coming back to what we were saying, we haven't got it all sorted when we've got to partnership to senior leadership roles. We're all still developing and learning all the time. And that's the point, isn't it? That we can admit that we haven't got all this stuff sussed out.
And how
we
dangerous
can
it
continue
is
to get better or try to, but we've all got to keep doing that. And I think that's what, having worked with you for a lot of years now, I mean, you are like a sponge, Mark. You will never stop being interested in and learning and wanting to know more about things. But it's really inspiring, and working with you guys and finding people that are like that has helped me to be more like that. I mean, no one's ever going to reach Mark's standards in that respect, I have to say, because he is an annoying 6-year-old.
5, yeah, I haven't matured to 6 yet. The other thing with this as well, and James, you've said it several times on the podcast over the years, which is the old, have you got 10 years experience or have you got 1 year's experience 10 times? And I think this is where the thirst for knowledge comes in, because whilst as partners, we're still growing and learning if we choose to all of the time, because we're human beings, But the one thing we do have over our younger members of the team is if you've got that inquisitive mind and you've done a lot of reading and research and developing your thought process around things, then at that point you probably have got, even when you're first a partner, even 14, 15 years experience. You haven't got 1 year's 15 times. You have genuinely got 15 years experience because you've been investing in yourself, where they maybe only have 2 or 3. So even though you may be on the same sort of the same journeys and the same trajectories, if you've continued to invest in yourselves, you're much further ahead of them because you've had more years and you've invested those years. So it doesn't mean they won't get to that. So this is where it then comes, I guess, to the whole thing about leadership, which is you have to make the team feel safe as well, because yes, it's okay to show vulnerability, and we've talked about this with guests on the podcast. Well, both of us have. It's good to show vulnerability, but you still have to be the person who they look to, who they feel the environment feels safe with you as well. And because you've got those years of experience which you've invested, you can make it feel safe for them as well, because you've just got that that many more miles on the clock, which are development miles.
Yeah, and it's a tough balance, isn't it? But you absolutely have got to make them feel secure and safe, and that you know where we're going. Because if you don't know, then the rest of us are in trouble. Which again comes back to your point about you had your roadmap, and you will continue to. I guess you've extended your roadmap, I guess, for the next phase of your life, and that's what it's all about, isn't it? So, Mark, as it is your last show, I am going to turn the tables on you and ask you the very same questions that we have always posed to our guests. So, the first one, which I can't remember word for word, but something along the lines of, what 3 things would you say to 18-year-old Mark, knowing what you know now?
Wow. Yeah. Do you
Don't
know what?
say you're not prepared, Mark. You've asked this
I
question
haven't
dozens
given
of
it.
times.
I haven't given it a massive amount of thought.
Not too much
Yeah.
thought.
No, I haven't really. I mean, as all the guests say, genuinely, I would not have listened to myself. You know that. You both know me as well as anyone in our business. Can you imagine me trying to give myself advice? It just wouldn't happen for a start, would it? So I wouldn't listen to it. I was 18. Now, at 25, I probably wouldn't have listened to myself still. If I was going to just try and do anything, and Jin Lally, who was on our show, she said nothing because I'd have missed out on, who knows how it would have affected the ripples of
Yeah.
time. It would have, I had to live those experiences, so I wouldn't have given myself any advice, because it would have changed the course of my complete life if I'd listened to myself. So I think that was a fantastic answer, and I think that for me that's right as well. I needed to experience some of those things. If I had no choice and I had to give myself at 18 3 bits of advice, it would have been, don't become an accountant, Mark. Start a thrash metal band. The downside of that is I would have joined the 28 Club probably, which wouldn't have been good. So
I have no idea what you're talking about.
you know what the 28 Club is? Loads of famous sort of rock stars and musicians have died at the age of 28.
I see.
Yeah.
Got
So,
you. Yeah.
so I think if I hadn't become
Name
an
some of them.
accountant,
Who died at 28?
Jim Morrison, is it Jim Morrison?
Right.
The Doors, Kurt Cobain,
Rings a
Amy
bell.
Winehouse. Yeah, there's just 3 to start with. So you see, I think this is where Jin is right, isn't it? If I'd have said, Mark, just practice the guitar more, start a thrash metal band, it probably would have had some really dire consequences, because I was immature, it would not have been good.
Yeah.
So that would have been my first one, but it would have been a bad outcome. Okay, so I'm going to turn this a little bit. You both know me well. I've given one that I think I would have given to an 18-year-old Mark. What would you have said to an 18-year-old Mark? What one piece from each of you as well?
I didn't know an 18-year-old Mark. I'm not sure I'd have got on with an 18-year-old Mark. But what
Stop asking why.
Stop
I mean
asking
that.
why. Yeah.
Based on the Mark that I've known for however many years, and then kind of extrapolating that back, if you like, and imagining that you were probably even worse when you were 18, it might be, don't forget to listen.
Yeah,
So I think
that's
sometimes,
a really good one.
yeah, we need to listen more and talk less.
Yeah, two ears and one mouth.
Yes, as you say quite often.
I've I definitely have used those in the wrong combo. Agreed.
I mean, I can't imagine what you were like at 18. You must have been unbearable. When did you meet Glenda?
We were 25.
Poor woman.
Probably a good job.
I would have said, Mark, and you heeded this advice in the main anyway, but I would have encouraged you to say what you think, and to back yourself, because there are times when you have very much done that. I'm thinking of partners meetings and client meetings and discussions we've had off air. You've got a really valuable, I find it very valuable way of looking at things, an insightful way of looking at things that often other people, maybe they think it, they don't say it to me, but I got so much great advice to share. And I think a lot of people have, but they don't necessarily say it. They fear, the consequences of doing so. I'd say probably throughout your career, you haven't been too concerned about the consequences. You've said what you meant, and I think that's why you are where you are now. That's how you're in the position where you can retire before you're 50. because you backed yourself and you've said stuff. Whereas I think if you'd have reined that in a bit, then I think you'd have been half as effective as you've proven to be throughout your career.
Yeah.
So from a purely leadership and professional basis, that I see as being something which has stood you in really good stead over your 30 years of work. Is you've been brave. Lots of people, they don't say what they mean, and they don't stand up in those. You talked about the business breakfast. There are some people that would have made an excuse and not done that event, and still not be talking at public events and done the radio and done the TV and the podcast, everything else. But you've stepped outside your comfort zone as well. So I think you followed your own advice, but that's what that's what I would have been encouraging you.
And we've talked about it before, haven't we, the three of us, that Mark has also been prepared to back up what he said with actions. So he wasn't just stirring trouble.
Yeah.
He actually, was willing to pull his sleeves up and get stuck in, kind of thing, and walk the walk. So I think that's the important thing as well. It's important to speak up, but also to actually put that into action,
deliver results.
Yeah.
Yeah. So. And really interesting. When I was 18, I probably did have quite strong views about things still. But when I was 18, I had, and we've talked about this on the show, James, I had an external locus of control predominantly when I was 18. And that remained dominant with me until I was probably 24, 25. And we talked about it on the episode. I can't remember what the episode was, what it was called now, but I'm sure Lizzie will put it in the show notes. So actually, the more you spin this out, so the two things I would say would be take responsibility. Actually thinking about off the back of what you said there, it's funny how it triggers things. Take responsibility for yourself and don't blame it on others. So really get that internal locus of control working. But the other thing is, don't be so black and white. I was quite black and white when I was younger. I was very right, wrong. This is the way. This is the only way. And it was probably only as I got to my later 20s, probably into my 30s, that I really started to really explore more options to problem solving, as opposed to, well, I know the answer, it's this, which very often there's hardly anything in life which is, and it's this. And for anyone who's not bored of listening to me anymore, it's very much around, well, it's all complex systems, it's dynamic systems, it's thinking about, okay, that might be the answer, but what is the consequence of that answer? And that's the bit. So I think this is just growing up, isn't it? When I was 18, internal locus of control, everything was black and white based on my life experiences to that point. And it didn't really start to blossom probably until I was in my 30s in terms of genuine, really exploring more options and thinking what was the knock-on effect of that decision. So I guess you could argue I matured in quite late in that respect. But they, so those two things really did change. So I think it just proves, doesn't it, that people can change, and especially when we're that age, depending on what influences you get put in front of, can have a massive impact on sort of your life course from there.
What do you put that down to, Mark? What happened? Did somebody influence you? Was it a book, or was it just growing up, life experiences? What?
It's funny. Two things kind of happened. One thing happened which had no impact on me until later, and I still cringe about it today. I used to play bowls. I retired about 32. I did it the opposite way around. Most people start when they're about 90. I started when I was 7. And I was playing in a competition with my dad, and so it was pairs, 4 wood pairs. There you go. Everyone's bored now.
This is crown green bowls.
No, this is flat green. And we were playing. It hasn't got a crown. It's flat. Crown green is humped in the middle.
Hasn't got.
But anyway.
Oh, I see.
Sorry.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah. So and they play. It's mainly an up north game. Crown. Green. So crown is it's mainly played up north. So me and my dad were playing in the EBA national pairs, 4 wood pairs, and we were playing against a couple of guys from North Walsham. Both of them actually passed away now. In fact, one of them, a guy, Russell Warren, you're a football fan, his son used to play for Rotherham. I think he's Rotherham manager now, Paul Warren.
Paul Warren, I think he's at Derby.
Yeah, so
that's a good guy. He won the DIS for DIS. He won
the
FA
trophy.
Vase.
Vase,
or something similar.
Anyway,
So it's Russell
Slight
was this.
aside.
So Paul's father, Russell, we were playing pairs, and my dad was like talking about a shot he was going to play, and basically I went through every reason why that shot could go wrong with my dad. Not go for it. I've got your back. Go for it. I gave him every reason it might go wrong, and Russell said something to me along the lines of, "For God's sake, Mark, why don't you let your dad just play? You put him off before he's even taken the shot." And I felt embarrassed, and I thought, it kind of stuck with me, but I didn't necessarily. So I guess I was probably, I don't know, early 20s at this point. It didn't really do anything, but it stuck with me. I can remember the embarrassment I felt on the green when he said it to me. And then come 25, we did and I've talked about this on the podcast before. We had a guy, Neil Taylor, who came in and did some training with us. It was for newly qualified. I just qualified as an accountant then. And it effectively was, he talked about, well, it's locus of control. You have a choice, so it was like, someone cuts you up in the car and you get angry. It's your choice to get angry. All this kind of stuff, and we kept saying, yeah, but if someone does this, then it's only right. And he's like, I'm not saying it's not right you feel like that, but you're still choosing to feel like that. And all of a sudden I had a massive light bulb moment at 25 that I choose my response. It was huge. At 25, people are listening to this thinking, really, Mark? God, where have you been, Mark? But it hit me at 25, which is, I have a choice. I choose how I respond. And once you've got that, once you pull that internal locus of control, once you get the internal locus of control, is absolutely liberating. It's so liberating, isn't it? And I don't know whether you two had a kind of epiphany moment around internal, external locus of control, but all of a sudden it was like, I'm angry, but I'm choosing to be angry. What do I want to be angry for? I'm making myself feel like crap. So I think, and then suddenly I realized what Russell had said to me, and I thought, God, yeah, I was like blaming, I was talking about this could happen, that could happen, negativity, internal, external locus of control, all of this stuff started to merge together. Then I met Glenda, who's like been a massively positive influence on my life, and it's like the stars aligned. So all this stuff came together. But as I said to you, it's kind of mid-20s, and then it was probably into my 30s before I really developed my thought processes around, okay, so there's more to this than meets the eye, expanding your thinking around answers, solutions. What are the knock-on effects? If I do this, what's going to happen then? So it was a bit of a journey, but it really majorly kicked off in my mid-20s.
Wow.
It's interesting as well because a lot of that's tied into beliefs, Mark. It's very easy to fall into the belief that you are what you've always been. You can't change. Actually, recognition there that you were sort of 25 years into your life there, and actually you were able to effectively adapt your personality, your approach to life, and you've benefited from it along the way. I think there's plenty of people that that's just the way I am. That's just who I am. Now that's a poor excuse a lot of the time for bad behaviour. This is a poor excuse.
Yeah.
To not have the discipline
Agreed.
to rein it in when you ought to. It's all very well sort of speaking out, but the consequences to your words and your actions, taking responsibility, and I can resonate with a lot of what you're saying. I attended, as I think we all have, the Winning Edge course with Richard Jackson many years ago. And that's one of the main pillars of that course, which is all about taking personal ownership, personal responsibility. He uses examples, when people say, I've got to go shopping with, the wife or the husband on Saturday, I've got to. You haven't got to do anything. Like you choose to do it because the consequences of not going shopping are greater than what you're prepared to accept. That's all part of growing up. It's not just a flick of a switch. It's quite interesting as well. You said there, Mark, that actually something, the bowls incident, that took years by the sounds of things for it to actually seep in. Some of these things just they lurk in the back of your brain, don't they? And then they sort of, it all fits together like a jigsaw.
Absolutely.
So,
yeah.
What's the other question, Becky?
So the other question is, Mark, what 3 books, podcasts, anything really would you recommend to our listeners along the themes that we've been discussing today? And I know there are hundreds of books in your collection.
None of them read.
3.
Yeah. Well,
that's not 3.
I'm not going to. I've got 5 books, so I'm gonna.
Typical
I'm just gonna. So I think the one thing I'm just going to say before I dive into these 5, which I went around the house and picked before we recorded. People very often say to me in the office, what leadership books should I read? What management books should I read? What podcasts should I listen to about leadership and management? And I will say to people, don't necessarily read ones on leadership and management. Just read anything, listen to anything, because you can draw lessons out of anything you read, and you can transpose and translate them back into leadership and management. Everything's got a message, so it's just trying to keep your ears and eyes open for what those lessons are. And if you just read management books, you become pretty boring, I think, in my map of the world, because most of them are, and we've talked about this, we did a podcast on it, is there any value in personal development, didn't we, James? And most books we've read, there's one key takeaway, and then they write 250 pages around it because the publisher needs it to have some substance to charge you $19.99 to buy the book or whatever. So, don't get hung up on business books. Yeah, there's some good stuff, but there's good stuff in everything. So the 5 books I've got, I will whip through them because I am conscious of your time, both of you. The first one I read when I was 17, I think, and it's called The Way of Weird by Brian Bates. Professor Brian Bates, actually. It's based on medieval pagan England, where a scribe for the Christian
The
church
look on
comes across
Becky's face when you were saying that. Sorry, this will be on YouTube. Yeah, carry on, Mark. Yeah.
So this scribe
Have you
comes
read
across
this
what
one,
brand,
Becky?
and
Have you read this? Yeah,
I
carry on.
read this every year when I can. It just reminds me. And so to cut a very long story short, you've got this guy who's like a wizard, effectively, and he's using plants for medicinal purposes and stuff. And this Christian, this guy who works for the monks, comes across to help convert England to Christianity. He's there as a fact-finding mission for the monks, so they can come in and rail Christianity down the throats of the pagans, the heathens in England. And it's kind of very much a story of how this young scribe realizes that there's different ways to look at life other than what he's been told through the monks who he works for. So it's a very much a good lesson for business, and it's what we've been talking about. There's more than one answer. There's no right or wrong. It's about kind of learning to be tolerant of other people's views, ideas. And that book was really influential, and I love reading it, and I would really recommend it. It's not a difficult read. Some of it is based on historical documents, so it's got some historical fact in it as well, but it's fascinating. And there's a bit in there where he's talking about the Thanes, who are effectively the Vikings, and they're talking about the way of the warrior, and it got transposed into a song. It's a folk, I can't remember what they call, folk metal, I think, a band who did an album off the back of this book. And there was a line in it which says about the way of the warrior: while living your life like an arrow in flight, you must always accept that the end is in sight, grateful at least for the fact that you knew you came for death, he did not come for you. And that came back to almost the start of our conversation, which is be brave. Be in fear. You're going to be in fear, but if you actually sit back, then you're not going to live your life. It's just going to happen to you. And that was very influential in my thinking around that. So that's book number 1.
Wow.
Okay, book number 2. John Seddon, Freedom from Command and Control. James and I actually did a full episode on this book, but it's very much around, managers should manage the systems, not the people. You get your systems right, everything else will flow off the back of it. Again, Lizzie, please link the episode we did on that one into the show notes. But again, that was very influential. My business coach recommended it to me years and years and years and years ago. And I applied some of that methodology into when I was running the business and private team 12, 14 years ago. So that book was highly influential in terms of how I wanted to lead the team. So I would really recommend that one. James, this is a new one, which I only read a few months ago after years of you telling me. So David Goggins, Never Finished. It was his second book. Unbelievable. And the one thing which I took away from that, and we talked about it after I'd read the book, the one message I've taken away from David Goggins is do something that you don't want to do every day. Just as simple as that. It doesn't have to be a big thing, but just do it. Just do it. And it kind of, through neuroscience and Andrew Huberman, whose podcast he was on when I'd listened to him eventually after you talked for me about 5 or 10 years about listening to the guy, he's now proven science has proven that it grows this part of your brain which develops willpower and will to live by doing things you don't want to do. That's in my toolkit now, and I do things pretty much every day that I don't want to do. I say to myself, do you know what? I don't want to do this, but I'm going to do it anyway. So that's the third book. Okay, you still with me, guys?
Yes.
Fourth one. This is where it gets a little bit more wacky. The Fifth Sacred Thing by Starhawk. So, yeah, I'm guessing you've not read that one either.
No.
So Starhawk, I think, is a white witch. I think, could be wrong. And anyway, the book is all around a future, almost like dystopian society, where you've got this tribe, this group of humans who work together. They live in harmony. They're practicing non-violence, and it's in America in the future. It's all toxicity is really high. The atmosphere is, I don't know if you can say it. The atmosphere is not good. It's toxic. It's unhealthy. The rivers are all polluted, but they're growing their own crops. They've kind of got a great community going on. And then the rest of the world is controlled by this kind of like military. And they come and try and take over this tribe. And they put resistance up without violence. And it's a great story. I really enjoyed the book. But the key message for me, the fifth sacred thing, without giving it away, is love. But it's sort of showing if you care for people and you work together as a tribe and you've got common interests and you've got core values that you stand by and don't waver from them, you can achieve anything. That's the moral of that book, and I love the book. It's really long, but it's worth the read. Because again, it comes back to business, doesn't it? If we've got values, if we've got shared values, if we've got a tribe who are fully committed to delivering upon it, you can achieve great things. So all of this stuff comes back to business. And Brett, final book, Reality Blind. A guy called Nate Hagens. I listened to his podcast, The Great Simplification. It's very much around all of the damage we're doing to the environment. Again, you bring it back to business. Yes, we've got things like ESG, but going forwards, we all need to ask ourselves, how can we be responsible business owners? How can we have the minimum impact on the environment so we leave something for the next generation? And it's not always about money. It's also about our legacy of what we do for the next generation of humans. So again, relevant to business, but completely nothing to do with business, if you like, as well. Questions?
James, any questions?
Observations, I think, more than anything else. It was interesting, Mark. You were talking about not deep diving into perhaps obvious leadership books. I tend to agree. I think it reminded me of the interview episode we did with Damien Horner, the marketing specialist, and he talked around. One of his 3 books was actually newspapers. Like, just pick a newspaper, different newspaper, like every day. Just like get up to speed and look at different ways of, because obviously every publication newspaper has a different angle, and just trying to sort of step into the shoes of of different ways of different people, different ways of thinking, and so it did sort of remind me of that, and how we've got to be really careful, particularly with technology these days. Again, I think we talked about this on the podcast about, with algorithms and things like that, it's very easy just to get sort of, getting narrower and narrower and narrower because, we read something or we watch something on TikTok or whatever, and it will then just create something, if you like that, then you must like this. And if you like that, you must like this. And you don't get to see all these other things.
Absolutely.
So I love the fact that you've not just focused on the ordinary, and that you've found meaning in things which, I suspect we could have a, I don't know, 100,000 guests on here, and not one of them would have marked out 2 of those books as being in their top 5. Meant to be top 3. Obviously, prioritization isn't one of Mark's best skills, but there are obvious sources for this stuff. But I love the fact that you've sought inspiration from places where wouldn't be necessarily obvious to us all. So
I agree. I was expecting them to be diverse, possibly random, and you certainly did that. But I joking aside, they do all look like fascinating books, and I really appreciate the fact that you gave it thought in terms of what breadth of topic, subjects, what might appeal to different people. So thank you for that, because I think that's it gives people a different way of looking at things. Like you say, we can all go to the leadership management section in a bookshop, can't we, and pull something off the shelf. But if you just expand your thinking a little bit, we can learn things from lots of different genres and different ways of thinking. So thank you, Mark.
Mark, will there be a book forthcoming from Mark Curtis, author, in the future?
There was always going to be a book, wasn't there, James?
Yeah, it's been threatened a number of times, isn't it?
Yeah, I know. It's possible. I've thought about it, but literally the last book I read / listened to was called Transitions. And someone recommended, they said, look, as you retire, Mark, it's probably worth having listened to this book. So I had to listen to it. And unsurprisingly, it talks very much around beginnings, middles, and ends. And the one thing that I've realized is, what we can do if we're not careful in life, business, intermingle the two, is we can actually move to a new beginning without having reached an end of something and having proper closure on something. So the one thing I'm going to do is I want proper closure on my business career. I'm not going to do anything for 6 to 12 months. When I say I'm not going to do anything, obviously I'm going to do stuff like grow my vegetables or whatever, but I'm not embarking on this is the new, the next new great part of the adventures of Mark Curtis. I want a proper ending to my business career where it comes to a finality before I then start the next thing. I don't just want to kind
closure,
of like
Mark, do you?
Proper closure. Yeah, I don't want to steamroll from one thing to the next, because otherwise I don't ever have proper ending to the business career. So it's proper, 6 to 12 months off, do some bits I really want to do for genuine enjoyment, and then think, okay, what's next? What's the next chapter over and above, the stuff I've already got planned, and possibly there could be a book in me.
I look forward to reading it. Is it fiction? Because fiction was something that you've been knocking around.
Yeah, possibly.
Isn't it? You've got some sort of North Norfolk detective series.
Yeah, I've thought about that. It could be fiction. Who knows? Who knows? I haven't got to the beginning yet, so I don't know what it would be.
Well, I think that very nicely brings us to the end of our chat today, guys. Mark, thank you. We've really appreciated you chatting with us today. James, thank you for joining us.
It's been good fun. I've missed it.
Yeah,
nice to be back, if only for one episode before it finishes.
Yeah. And thank you to both of you. I mean, obviously between the three of us, we've knocked out 140 podcasts, which we know from the feedback we've had, there's been some really valuable content, which was all we ever designed it for, wasn't it? It's very much around. We've got quite a lot of experience. We've got people who we know have got a lot of experience and messages to give, and let's try and genuinely put something out there to for the greater good. It was never about making more money. Yes, it helped with the SEO from Larkin Gowan, but it wasn't about that. It was about us giving some good out into the world, and just seeing if we could help people.
And we have had fun.
And it was really good fun along the way, wasn't it? I mean, we've learned a huge amount. Doing these episodes, we've met some fantastic people. If we go back to feeling the fear, Mark, I seem to recall our first episode back in April 2020. The world was a different place then, and as we said, and it wasn't an obvious thing to do a podcast then. Podcasts were clearly a thing. They were still they're certainly growing in popularity, but there weren't too many chartered accountancy practices doing podcasts at that point, and we kicked off without a script, which is a brave move, pretty telling, pretty obvious to those that were listening in, but it was very much impromptu, wasn't it?
It was.
And we've carried on in the same vein.
Well, I just wanted to come in quickly and just say, based on conversations that I've had with a lot of our younger folk in the firm, so some of our trainees or those who have qualified and then come to us, they've said they've had chats with me and said about how valuable they found some of these episodes because it's you guys telling them, and there's a relatability in you guys being so open and honest about your journeys and your struggles, in particular your struggles. I think it's really emboldened some of our team at Larkin Gowan to kind of feel okay about stuff, because you guys have made it to partner and you didn't necessarily have everything all together when at certain points. So Mark in particular.
I'm not sure that would surprise them.
No. And as the great man Shakespeare P once said, no legacy is so rich as honesty. So thank you from me. Thanks so much, guys, for your honesty, because these episodes wouldn't have been what they were without that. So
thank you. And
Thanks, Lizzie.
we have to, you know, we can't sign off without saying a massive thank you to you, Lizzie. You know,
Absolutely.
what you've done around the production of the podcast has been phenomenal, which I know the audience will have benefited from your input and how you've managed to cut it together to make it more listenable for them. So thank you for everything you've done as well. It's been really appreciated.
thank you very much. And yeah, people out there, they really don't know the struggle that I've had with some of these episodes.
Yeah, we can't upset her too much because the bloopers are all there somewhere.
Exactly.
So we can have a slightly different ending for the listeners today, can't we? Because you don't need to rate and review us anymore. You can if you want. They'll be out there in perpetuity now, forever.
I mean, the marketeer in me is like, no, please still go and rate and review.
Okay, so we can leave this in. So you've heard it from the producer there. Please rate and review us. Even though we're not doing it anymore, it will still help people find the 140 back catalogue episodes. A massive thank you to Larkin Gowan. They've been, yes, we're part of the business, but Larkin Gowan have been massively generous with the time they've allowed us to have to invest in this 140 episodes, the research, the recording time. So thank you. It's a tremendous business. I've thoroughly enjoyed my 27 years with Larkin Gowan now. So check out their website to see how their team of experts can help you in your business. And remember, they are accountants and business advisors, so they can really make a difference in working with you on your journey. And from us three, I guess it just leaves us to say, take care of yourself, have a great life, and boost your health, wealth, and self.
Thanks, Mark. Thanks,
Thank
Becky.
you.
Take care, everyone.